12 days before my sister's wedding, my mother sent me a message that changed everything. It was short. "Wendy, don't come to the wedding. It would be better for everyone." I stared at those words for almost a minute. Not because I didn't understand them, because I understood them perfectly. For years, I had been the daughter my family called whenever they needed something. A favor, a payment, a business connection, help organizing an event. And now, suddenly, I was an embarrassment. What my family didn't realize was that I had already paid for a huge part of my sister's wedding. And I still had every receipt. My name is Wendy Morgan, and I owned a small but successful event planning company called Westbrook Events. I wasn't rich. I wasn't part of some elite social circle. I had simply worked for everything I had. My younger sister, Vivian, was getting married at Crest Haven Manor, an expensive venue that our mother had been obsessed with for months. The wedding was supposed to be the biggest social event our family had ever hosted, and I had quietly made it possible. I had arranged the florist, catering, photographers, music, transportation, lighting, and dozens of other details. The total contracted value was more than $46,000. I had personally covered about $26,000 in deposits through my company. I never complained about it. Vivian was my sister. I wanted her to be happy, but my mother had a different vision. She wanted the wedding to look expensive, and more importantly, she wanted the family to look important. She constantly worried about what people would think, what they would wear, who they would invite, which table someone would sit at, and apparently where I fit into that picture. A few days before the wedding, I overheard my mother talking about me. She didn't know I was standing nearby. She said I was rough around the edges. Then she laughed and said I made the family look low class. I walked away without saying anything. I told myself I had misunderstood. Then came the message, "Don't come to the wedding." I called her. She didn't answer. I called my father. He didn't answer either. Then my sister finally called. Her voice was nervous. "Wendy, Mom thinks it would be better if you just stayed away." I asked her one question. "Do you want me there?" There was silence. Then she whispered, "I don't know." That was enough. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply opened my laptop and started looking at the wedding contracts. Every vendor had my company's account information. Every deposit had been paid by me. Every agreement had my name attached to it. So I made a decision. If I wasn't welcome as family, I wasn't going to continue acting like the family's unpaid event planner. I contacted every vendor. I canceled what could legally be canceled. I withdrew what was mine. And I told them the wedding would need to be handled by the actual people hosting it. Within hours, my mother was calling. Then my father. Then my sister. The messages became increasingly desperate. "Wendy, what have you done?" I didn't answer, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to make everyone else comfortable. I was protecting myself. But then I discovered something much worse. My mother hadn't simply decided to exclude me. She had been planning it for months. I found a family group chat, and in that chat were messages about me. They had been discussing how to slowly push me out of the family after the wedding. They wanted me to believe I had simply chosen to distance myself. They wanted everyone else to think I was the problem. One message stopped me completely. My mother had written, "Wendy can't know we're doing this gradually." Another person replied that I had become too involved in the family business and needed to be phased out. I read the messages again and again. Then I realized something. The wedding wasn't the reason they were pushing me away. The wedding was simply the moment they thought they could finally do it. So I saved everything. Every message. Every receipt. Every contract. I didn't post anything online. I didn't confront them. I just kept the evidence. And then the wedding day arrived. I wasn't supposed to be there, but someone unexpected was. Beatrice Ashford. She was one of the most influential people connected to the event, and someone my mother desperately wanted to impress. When she saw me, she walked straight over. "Wendy," she said, "why aren't you inside?" I smiled. "I'm not invited." She looked at me for several seconds. Then she asked, "Who told you that?" I said, My mother. Beatrice didn't say anything. She simply looked toward my family. And that's when I realized she already knew something was wrong. What happened next would expose everything my family had spent months trying to hide. The next morning, I started going through every wedding document. There was no anger left in me, just clarity. The florist had already received a deposit. The caterer had one too. The venue, photographers, musicians, transportation crew, everyone had been paid through my company. My mother had spent months telling people that she was organizing the wedding. But the truth was very different. I was the one who had made most of it possible. And now she wanted me gone. I didn't want revenge. I simply wanted my money and my dignity back. So I contacted the vendors and explained the situation. Some were shocked. One of them asked, "Are you sure? This is your sister's wedding." I told her, yes. And apparently, I'm not part of the family anymore. That afternoon, my phone exploded. My mother called 17 times. My father called twice. Vivian sent message after message. "Please don't do this." Then my mother finally left a voicemail. Her voice was completely different from the woman who had told me I made the family look low class. "Wendy, you're being emotional. We can work this out. You can't just abandon your sister's wedding." I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. Because she still didn't understand. I wasn't abandoning the wedding. I had been abandoned first. A few hours later, something unexpected happened. Beatrice Ashford contacted me. She had been involved with the Crest Haven event network for years, and she knew exactly how much business Westbrook Events had brought into that circle. She asked me to meet her privately. When I arrived, she already had a folder sitting on the table. She looked at me and said, "Wendy, I want you to tell me what happened." So I did. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't insult my mother. I simply told her the truth. My mother had excluded me. My family had been discussing how to remove me gradually. And I had paid thousands of dollars toward the wedding they were now telling me I wasn't welcome at. Beatrice listened without interrupting. Then she asked one question. "Do you have proof?" I opened my bag. I had everything. Contracts, invoices, bank statements, emails, and the family messages. Beatrice looked through them carefully. When she reached the group chat, her expression changed. She read one message, then another, then another. Finally, she looked up. "Your mother wrote these?" "Yes." "And she knew you were paying for the wedding?" "Yes." Beatrice closed the folder. "Then don't say another word." I didn't understand. She continued, "Let the wedding happen." I stared at her. "What?" "Go home. Don't fight with them. Don't post anything. Don't threaten anyone." She paused. "Just keep your evidence." I followed her advice. For the next several days, I said nothing. Then the wedding day arrived. My family expected me to stay away, but Beatrice had other plans. I arrived at Crest Haven quietly. I wasn't there to make a scene. I simply wanted to see my sister one last time. Vivian saw me first. She looked terrified. "Wendy." Before she could say anything else, our mother appeared. Her face hardened. "What are you doing here?" I looked at her. I was invited. She immediately turned toward Beatrice. But Beatrice was already walking toward us. "Actually," she said, "I invited her." My mother went silent. Beatrice looked around the room. Then she said something that made everyone stop talking. "Before this wedding continues, there are some things this family needs to understand." My father stepped forward. "Beatrice, this isn't necessary." She looked directly at him. "Oh, I think it is." Then she opened the folder and began reading. The first page was a vendor invoice. Catalina Blooms, $7,800. Then catering, $9,400. The venue, $18,000. Photography, music, lighting, transportation. One by one, she read the numbers. The room became completely silent. Then Beatrice turned the final page toward my family. Total contracted value, $46,200. She looked at my mother. "And do you know who paid the deposits?" My mother didn't answer. Beatrice did. "Wendy Morgan." My father's face changed. My sister covered her mouth. And my mother suddenly looked like she wanted the floor to open beneath her. But Beatrice wasn't finished. She reached into the folder again. "This," she said, "is a copy of your family group chat." And that's when my mother realized the private messages she thought would never leave that chat were about to become public. Beatrice placed the printed group chat on the table. My mother stared at the pages. For the first time that evening, she looked genuinely afraid. Beatrice read the first message aloud. Then another. And another. They had discussed me behind my back for months. They had talked about making me feel like I was choosing to leave the family. They had talked about slowly pushing me out after the wedding. Then Beatrice looked directly at my mother. "You told Wendy she made this family look low class." My mother tried to speak. Wendy offered to help. Beatrice cut her off. Helping someone and being respected by them are two different things. My mother looked toward my father for support. He didn't say anything. He just stared at the floor. That silence said more than anything he could have said. Then my sister, Vivian, stepped forward. "Mom." Her voice was shaking. "You told me Wendy didn't want to come." My mother looked at her. "I was trying to protect you." Vivian shook her head. "No. You told me she was sick. You told me she was choosing to stay away." The room went completely quiet. Vivian looked at me, and for the first time, I could see that she finally understood. She hadn't known the truth. She had believed everything our mother told her. Then Beatrice picked up another document. "These are the actual vendor invoices." She turned toward the family. Wendy Morgan paid more than $26,000 of her own company's money toward this wedding. My mother immediately said, "She offered." Beatrice nodded. "Yes, she did." Then she looked directly at my mother. "But you called her an embarrassment." My mother had nothing to say. Beatrice continued. "You accepted her money while planning to remove her from the family." My father finally lifted his head, but he still didn't defend my mother. And that's when my mother broke. Not because the documents had been exposed. Not because the family had learned the truth. She broke because, for the first time, my father wasn't covering for her. She looked at him desperately. "Richard?" He said nothing. She turned back toward Beatrice. "It wasn't supposed to become public." Beatrice calmly replied, "That's the problem with private conversations. People forget that words still belong to them after they write them." Then Vivian walked across the room. She stopped beside me. She didn't grab my hand. She didn't make a dramatic speech. She simply stood next to me, and somehow that meant everything. I looked at my mother. Her makeup was beginning to run. Her pearl pin was crooked. She looked nothing like the confident woman who had told me I was too embarrassing to attend my own sister's wedding. I finally spoke. "Mom, you told me I make this family look low class." She looked at me, but didn't answer. I continued. "You spent 2 years trying to make me believe I chose to leave." My voice stayed calm. "But I didn't choose to leave." I paused. "I just stopped paying for people who wouldn't even say my name." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I turned toward my sister. "Vivian, be happy." She started crying. "Trent is a good man. Don't let what happened tonight ruin your wedding." Then I walked over and kissed her on the side of her head, just like I used to when she was a little girl. It had been 7 years since I'd done that. I turned toward the door. As I passed Beatrice, she quietly said, "Drive safely, Wendy." I nodded. Then I walked out. I didn't look back. I reached my car and sat behind the wheel. For about 40 seconds, I just stared through the windshield. Then I started the engine. As I drove home, the sky over Sacramento was turning pink. I didn't cry until I reached my driveway. Then I finally let everything out. I cried for about 10 minutes. After that, I made tea. I sat on my couch. And for the first time in years, my home felt completely peaceful. My phone was full of messages. 23 texts. 8 missed calls. People asking if I was okay. Telling me that Beatrice had handled everything perfectly. Telling me they finally understood what had happened. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. 3 days later, a small cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was from Beatrice. Inside was a short note. She thanked me for what I had done, and for what I had not done. Then she invited me to tea.
Quarterly.
I smiled, because I realized something. My family had spent years worrying about status. Beatrice had spent her life building something real. And somehow, the person my family considered low class had earned the respect of the woman they had been desperate to impress. But the story didn't end there. 6 months later, Westbrook Events was doing better than ever. I hired a second coordinator. New clients started coming through the same network my family had once tried to use against me. My sister and I slowly started talking again. My mother called once. I didn't answer. My father sent a holiday card. I mailed it back unopened. And Beatrice? She kept her promise. Every few months, we sat down for tea. We talked about business. Sometimes we talked about my sister. We never talked about my mother. I still keep the same pen I used to sign those wedding contracts. It sits on my desk beside my event binder. And whenever I see it, I remember the lesson that changed everything. You don't have to prove your worth to people who have already decided not to see it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's simply walking away and building a life they can no longer control. 6 months passed after the wedding. I expected my life to feel different. Instead, it felt quieter. And that was better. Westbrook Events was doing better than it had before. The money I had recovered went back into the business, and I hired a second coordinator named Priscilla. She was 24, sharp, confident, and reminded me of myself before I had spent years worrying about what my family thought of me. Then something unexpected happened. 3 new weddings came through the Ashford network. Beatrice never told anyone to send me clients. She didn't have to. People had seen what happened. They had seen who actually showed up when it mattered. And they remembered. The deposit money I had lost on the original wedding was replaced within a couple of months by a new corporate client. For the first time, I wasn't working to prove anything to my family. I was simply building my own life. My sister, Vivian, and I slowly began talking again. At first, it was just coffee. Once a month. No arguments. No family gossip. No pretending everything was normal. Just 2 sisters trying to figure out whether they could rebuild something that had been damaged by someone else. Trent came with her twice. He apologized for not understanding what had been happening. I told him I didn't blame him. He was a good man. He simply hadn't seen the truth. My mother called me once in October. I watched her name appear on my phone. For a moment, I thought about answering. Then I let it stop ringing. She left no voicemail. My father sent me a holiday card in December. I mailed it back unopened. Aunt Marjorie, who had been part of the family conversations about me, quietly disappeared from the country club's Christmas list. I heard about it from a friend over coffee. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel satisfied. I simply realized that consequences don't always need your involvement. Sometimes people create their own. Beatrice and I continued having tea every few months. We talked mostly about business. Sometimes about Vivian. We never talked about my mother. One afternoon, Beatrice looked at the pen sitting beside my notebook. It was the same Mont Blanc pen I had used when signing the wedding contracts. She smiled. You still use it? I nodded. 47 new contracts since that wedding. She laughed softly. I looked at the pen for a moment. That pen reminded me of everything. The money, the humiliation, the family messages, the wedding. And the moment I finally stopped trying to earn a place at a table where people had already decided I didn't belong. My mother had spent 30 years climbing a social ladder. She cared about appearances. She cared about who was watching. She cared about what people would say. And somewhere along the way, she had confused status with worth. I finally understood something. When I started becoming successful on my own, I became a threat to the image she had built. Not because I was better than her, but because I didn't need the approval she had spent her entire life chasing. She wanted me to disappear quietly. She wanted everyone to believe that I had chosen to leave. But I hadn't. I simply stopped paying for people who refused to respect me. That was the difference. I didn't destroy my family. I didn't expose them online. I didn't try to embarrass my mother. I just kept the receipts. And when the truth finally needed to be seen, I had nothing to hide. So if you've ever been made to feel like you're not good enough for your own family, remember this. Sometimes the people who call you low class are only afraid that you'll discover how little their approval actually means. You don't have to fight for a seat at a table where people don't want you. Build your own table. And let your work speak for you. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's walking away quietly and becoming completely impossible to control. That was my story.